The air in London is thick with the scent of coal smoke and damp pavement as you step onto the cobblestones. You feel the weight of your layers, the stiff collar pressing against your neck, and the heavy wool of your coat. It is the year 1850, and the world around you is governed by a silent, invisible map of etiquette. Every glance, every nod, and every gesture carries a hidden meaning that could make or break your reputation. You are not just walking through a city, you are navigating a minefield of social expectations where a misplaced word or an unbuttoned glove is a public scandal. Silence and decorum are your only shields. To survive here, you must master the art of being seen without ever truly being known. Welcome to the rigid, beautiful, and suffocating reality of the Victorian age. You are standing on a street corner in London during the mid-1860s. The air is thick. It tastes of sulfur and coal smoke, a gritty residue that settles on your skin and clings to the fabric of your coat. But it is not just the soot that makes the world feel dark. As you look around, you notice a striking lack of color. A sea of black, charcoal, and deep violet moves past you on the sidewalk. Men in silk top hats and heavy wool overcoats walk with a measured pace, their faces set in expressions of stern neutrality. Women pass by in massive, bell-shaped skirts, their heads bowed slightly under the weight of veils made of scratchy black crepe. This is not a funeral procession for a single person. This is the daily life of an entire empire. The atmosphere feels heavy, as if the very oxygen is weighted with a sense of solemnity and expectation. You might wonder who died to cause such a universal display of grief. The answer is Prince Albert, the husband of Queen Victoria. He passed away in December of 1861, and while years have passed since his death, for the woman who sits upon the throne, time has stopped. Because she is the symbolic mother of the nation, time has stopped for you too. This is the shadow of the Widow of Windsor, and as you walk through these streets, you are walking through her personal landscape of mourning. You decide to move with the crowd, trying your best to blend in. But blending in requires more than just wearing the right clothes. It requires an internal shift in your posture and your thoughts. In this world, your external appearance is the only map people have to your internal character. If your collar is slightly wilted, you are viewed as someone with a crumbling moral center. If you laugh too loudly at a joke on the street, you are seen as vulgar and untrustworthy. Every movement you make is being catalogued and judged by the hundreds of eyes passing you by. You find yourself slowing your pace. To rush is to be undignified. To run is unthinkable. You notice how the people around you interact. When two men of equal social standing pass each other, they offer a crisp, almost clinical nod. If a man passes a woman he knows, he lifts his hat, but he does not stop to speak unless she acknowledges him first. The rules of the street are like a complex dance where one wrong step could lead to social exile. You realize that you are not just walking down a road. You are navigating a minefield of etiquette. The Queen herself has retreated into the depths of Windsor Castle and Osborne House. She has become a ghost, a reclusive figure who refuses to appear in public without her mourning weeds. This creates a strange paradox for you and the other citizens. The head of the state is invisible, yet her presence is felt in every black ribbon tied to a shop window and every somber headline in the morning paper. She has set a standard of grief that has become the moral compass of the age. To be happy, to be bright, or to be frivolous is seen as a betrayal of the Queen's sorrow. You turn a corner and see a shop window filled with what is known as mourning jewelry. You step closer to the glass. Behind the pane, you see necklaces and brooches made of jet, a petrified coal that is deep, lightless black. There are also rings and lockets containing intricately woven patterns of human hair. This hair belonged to the deceased, turned into a wearable relic. You feel a chill as you realize the level of obsession this society has with the dead. Death is not something to be moved past. It is something to be worn, polished, and displayed. The rules dictate exactly how long you must mourn a cousin, a sibling, or a spouse. For a husband, a woman must wear full black for 2 years. To deviate from this by even a month would be a scandal that could ruin her reputation forever. As you continue your walk, you start to feel the physical restriction of the era. If you are a woman in this scene, you are encased in a corset that pulls your ribs inward, making it difficult to take a full breath. Above that, layers of petticoats and a crinoline frame weigh down your hips. Your movements are restricted to a graceful glide because the architecture of your clothing does not allow for anything else. If you are a man, your high starched collar digs into your jawline, forcing you to keep your head held high and stiff. The clothing is a physical manifestation of the social rules. It is designed to keep you upright, rigid, and restrained. You pass a group of children playing near a park gate. Even they are not exempt. The small boys wear miniature versions of their father's suits, and the girls are dressed in stiff fabrics that prevent them from running with any real freedom. There is no such thing as a carefree childhood in the way you might understand it. From the moment they can speak, these children are taught that the world is watching them. They are told that their primary duty is to bring credit to their family name. The shadow of the Queen's grief extends even to the nursery. The silence of the street is what strikes you next. Despite the horses' hooves clattering on the cobblestones and the distant rumble of the underground railway, the human element is remarkably quiet. People speak in low, hushed tones. There is a sense that the world is a giant cathedral where one must whisper out of respect. This is the Victorian ideal of the domestic sphere and the public square. Privacy is guarded like a treasure, yet everyone's business is scrutinized. You feel the constant pressure of the invisible audience. Neighbors are watching from behind heavy velvet curtains. Shopkeepers are noting who you are with and how you carry yourself. This is a world of incredible technological advancement. You see the telegraph wires stretching overhead and the steam rising from the factories in the distance. Great Britain is the most powerful empire on the planet, reaching its claws into every corner of the globe. Yet, in the middle of this industrial revolution, the social heart of the country is frozen in a state of perpetual 1861. The widow of Windsor has demanded that the world remain as it was when Albert was alive. The clocks in his room are still wound. His clothes are still laid out every morning by servants who act as if he might walk through the door at any moment. As a resident of this era, you are caught between the future and the past. You are living in a time of steam engines and evolutionary theory, but you are governed by a code of conduct that feels ancient and unyielding. You begin to understand that the Victorian social rules are not just about which fork to use at dinner. They are a way of creating order in a world that is changing too fast. If everything outside is shifting, if cities are growing and old religions are being questioned, then the home and the self must remain perfectly still. You stop in front of a grand townhouse. The brass knocker is polished to a mirror shine. A servant in a crisp uniform is scrubbing the front steps. Even this act of cleaning is a performance of status. To have a clean doorstep is to tell the world that you have the means to employ someone to keep it that way. You realize that in this society, there is no such thing as a neutral action. Every choice you make, from the color of your gloves to the way you greet a neighbor, is a signal of your place in the hierarchy. The shadow of the Widow of Windsor is not just a shadow of sadness. It is a shadow of control. It is a collective agreement to maintain a facade of perfection, no matter how much effort it takes. You feel a sense of exhaustion just thinking about the energy required to maintain this level of poise for a single afternoon. To live here is to be a performer in a play that never ends, where the script is written by a grieving woman in a castle and the audience is everyone you have ever met. You look up at the gray sky, feeling the weight of the black wool on your shoulders. The world is beautiful in its own somber way, but it is also suffocating. The rules are the walls of a beautiful prison. As you prepare to step further into this world, you must remember the most important rule of all. Never let the mask slip. In the reign of the Widow of Windsor, your reputation is the only thing you truly own, and it can be taken away by a single misplaced smile. You take a deep breath, adjust your hat, and step forward into the gloom, ready to play your part in the grand, silent drama of Victorian life. The heavy mahogany door clicks shut behind you, and for a moment, the sudden silence is so thick you can almost feel it pressing against your ears. The roar of the London street, the clatter of iron-rimmed wheels on cobblestones, and the shouting of street vendors are instantly replaced by the muffled, rhythmic ticking of a long case clock. You stand in the hallway, and the air here is different. It smells of beeswax, stale lavender, and the faint, sulfurous tang of coal smoke that manages to seep through even the tightest window seals. This is not just a building where people sleep and eat. You have entered a temple. In the Victorian mind, the home was far more than a shelter. It was the cult of domesticity personified. As the world outside became increasingly chaotic, dirty, and competitive due to the Industrial Revolution, the middle and upper classes felt a desperate need for a sanctuary. They divided the world into two distinct halves, the public sphere and the private sphere. The public sphere, the world of business and politics, was seen as a dangerous, morally compromising wasteland where a man had to be ruthless to survive. The private sphere, the home, was the opposite. It was meant to be a holy shrine of purity, peace, and moral instruction. And you, as you stand on the thick patterned carpet of the entry hall, are expected to treat it with the appropriate reverence. You look around and notice that every square inch of the hallway is occupied. There is a heavy oak stand for umbrellas and walking sticks, a small table for a silver tray, and walls covered in dark, floral wallpaper that seems to writhe in the dim light. This is your first introduction to the Victorian decorative philosophy known as horror vacui, or the fear of empty spaces. To a Victorian, an empty wall or a bare table was a sign of poverty or, worse, a lack of culture. Wealth and character were expressed through the sheer volume of things you owned. Parlor maid appears. She is a silent, ghostly figure in a crisp black dress and a starched white apron. Her movements so practiced that she seems to glide rather than walk. She does not look you in the eye. To do so would be a breach of the invisible wall between the serving class and the served. You hand her your hat and gloves, and then you produce your visiting card. This small piece of pasteboard is your passport in this world. The etiquette surrounding the visiting card is a language unto itself. If you were to fold the upper left corner, it would mean you are visiting in person. If you were to leave two cards, it might signify a visit to both the master and mistress of the house. Today, you simply place it on the silver tray, and she carries it away to announce your presence. You are led into the drawing room, the heart of the domestic shrine. The room is dim, the heavy velvet curtains drawn tight to prevent the sun from fading the expensive carpets. It takes a moment for your eyes to adjust to the twilight. This room is the face the family shows to the world. It is filled with overstuffed chairs draped in lace antimacassars, which are small cloths designed to protect the fabric from the macassar hair oil used by gentlemen. There are footstools covered in needlepoint, cabinets filled with delicate porcelain figurines, and glass domes protecting arrangements of dried flowers or even taxidermy birds. Tea is served, and the ritual becomes even more precise. The way you hold your cup, the way you stir your sugar without clinking the spoon against the porcelain, the way you take a bite of a cucumber sandwich. Each gesture is a test. If you pass, you are seen as a person of character and standing. If you fail, the word will spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. In the Victorian world, your reputation is your most valuable currency, and it can be spent or lost in a single afternoon. Beneath this veneer of refined perfection, however, there is a hidden machinery. The shrine of the home only functions because of the grueling labor of those who live in the shadows. Below your feet, in the basement kitchens, and up in the cramped attic bedrooms, a small army of servants is at work. They wake before dawn to scrub the grates and light the fires so that the rooms are warm before the family descends. They carry heavy scuttles of coal up multiple flights of stairs to keep the fires burning. They spend hours on their knees polishing the very floorboards you just walked across. The Victorian family went to great lengths to keep this labor invisible. Servants were expected to disappear into the woodwork when a guest appeared. In some houses, back staircases were built specifically so that the staff would never be seen moving between floors. The perfect home was supposed to seem like it functioned by magic, a self-sustaining ecosystem of grace and order. The reality was much grittier, but to acknowledge that grit would be to break the spell of the domestic sanctuary. As the clock on the mantel strikes the hour, you realize your visit must come to an end. A formal morning call, despite the name, usually takes place in the afternoon and should last no longer than 15 to 30 minutes. To overstay your welcome is a serious breach of etiquette. It suggests that you do not value the mistress of the house's time, or that you are unaware of the busy schedule of social obligations she must maintain. You rise, offer a polite closing remark, and make your way back to the hallway. The maid appears once more to return your hat and gloves. As you step back over the threshold and the front door closes behind you, the noise of the street hits you like a physical blow. The air feels thinner, sharper, and noticeably dirtier. You look back at the soot-stained bricks of the house, and for a moment, you understand the desperate appeal of the shrine you just left. In a world that was changing too fast, where old certainties were being swept away by steam and steel, the Victorian home offered a fixed point. It was a place where time seemed to stand still, where the rules were clear, and where every lace doily and porcelain figurine served as a bulwark against the rising tide of the modern age. You adjust your coat, feeling the weight of that silence still clinging to you, and step back into the flow of the city, leaving the holy shrine to its quiet, velvet-lined vigil. You stand on the corner of a bustling London thoroughfare, perhaps near the intersection of Regent Street and Oxford Street, and for a moment, the sheer volume of humanity is overwhelming. The air is a thick, gray soup of coal smoke, the smell of damp wool, and the pungent, omnipresent scent of horse manure. But as your eyes adjust to the flickering gaslight and the shadows of the late afternoon, the chaos begins to organize itself. You realize that you are not just looking at a crowd. You are looking at a carefully constructed machine, a living map of status where every person knows exactly where they fit on the great social ladder. In the Victorian world, class is not a vague concept or a political talking point. It is a physical reality that you carry on your back, speak with your tongue, and display in the very way you move your body. To understand this society, you must understand the taxonomy of rank, a system so rigid that it often feels as though it were ordained by God himself. Look down at the pavement near your feet. There, weaving through the legs of the crowd, are the members of what the era calls the lower orders. You see a costermonger, a street seller with a barrow full of bruised apples. His clothes are a patchwork of rough corduroy and greasy moleskin, and his voice is a rhythmic, guttural shout that cuts through the din of the carriages. To him, life is a daily gamble against starvation. If he does not sell his fruit today, he does not eat tomorrow. Just beyond him, you notice a group of casual laborers waiting near a warehouse door. These are the men who survive on the strength of their backs alone. They are the unskilled, the invisible foundation upon which the entire empire rests. Their world is one of damp tenements, shared beds, and the constant, gnawing fear of the workhouse. For them, the social rules are simple: survival and the fierce, protective loyalty to one's own neighborhood. But even within the working class, there is a hierarchy as sharp as any blade. You see a man walking with a certain pride in his step, wearing a clean, though worn, waistcoat and carrying a wooden box of tools. He is an artisan, perhaps a cabinet maker or a printer. He has a trade. He has served an apprenticeship. In his mind, he is worlds apart from the man sweeping the dung from the street. He belongs to the labor aristocracy, and he expects a certain level of respect from those beneath him. Now, shift your gaze toward the shop fronts. You see a man in a tall silk hat and a dark frock coat, stepping out of a chemist's shop. He is not a laborer, yet he is not a lord. He represents the great middle class, the engine of Victorian progress. This is the most complex and anxious layer of the taxonomy. If you were to follow him home, you would find a house in the suburbs, a small garden, and a parlor filled with heavy furniture and lace doilies. The middle class is obsessed with a single word: respectability. For this man, class is a performance. He must maintain the appearance of prosperity even if his bank account is nearly empty. He is terrified of falling back into the ranks of the manual laborers, and so he clings to the symbols of his status. He has at least one servant, perhaps a young girl from the country who does the heavy scrubbing. He spends his Sundays in a prominent pew at church. He treats his home as a fortress of morality. Within this middle class, you find further divisions. There is the lower middle class, consisting of clerks, bookkeepers, and shop assistants. They are the men who wear paper collars to hide the fact that they cannot afford to have their shirts laundered every day. They live in a state of perpetual striving, hoping that through hard work and clean living, they might one day reach the upper middle class. These are the doctors, the lawyers, and the wealthy manufacturers who own the factories. They have reached a level of comfort that allows them to educate their sons at private schools and perhaps even buy a small estate in the country. However, no matter how much money a manufacturer makes, there is a glass ceiling that he can see but never quite shatter. This is the boundary of the upper class, the landed gentry and the peerage. You watch as a sleek, black carriage rolls past the common traffic. Inside, catching only a glimpse through the window, you see a woman dressed in silk and velvet, her posture perfectly upright, her face a mask of serene indifference. She does not look at the crowd. She looks through them. To be truly upper class in the Victorian era is to possess something that money cannot buy: lineage. It is the world of the Duke, the Marquis, the Earl, the Viscount, and the Baron. Their power is rooted in the land, in estates that have been in their families for centuries. They do not work for a living, at least not in any sense that a clerk would recognize. They manage their lands, they sit in the House of Lords, and they participate in the season, that frantic calendar of balls, races, and hunting parties that defines the social life of the elite. You notice something peculiar about the way these people interact. It is not just the clothes. It is the language. If you were to speak to that gentleman on the corner, he would know within 3 sentences exactly where you went to school and who your father was. The Victorian ear is finely tuned to the nuances of accent and vocabulary. To drop the letter H at the beginning of a word is a social death sentence for anyone aspiring to respectability. There are certain words that a lady simply does not use, and certain ways of pronouncing a vowel that signal ancient, inherited wealth rather than the loud, bright clatter of new money. The anxiety of rank is perhaps most visible in the figure of the governess. A woman you see walking toward a park with 2 small children in tow. She is a living paradox. She is often the daughter of a middle-class family that has fallen on hard times. She is educated, she speaks French, and she plays the piano. By birth and breeding, she is a lady. Yet, she is an employee. She sits at the dinner table of her employers but is not quite one of them, and she is far above the servants who resent her for her refined manners. She exists in a social limbo, a constant reminder of how precarious one's position on the ladder can be. The taxonomy of class extends even into the physical spaces of the city. As you walk, you notice how the streets change. The wide, paved boulevards of the West End, lined with grand stone facades and patrolled by well-dressed constables, give way to the narrow, crooked alleys of the East End. In the wealthy districts, the houses have separate entrances for the servants, hidden away in the basement area so that the delivery of coal or the removal of trash never offends the eyes of the residents. Even in death, the classes remain divided. If you were to visit a cemetery, you would see the soaring marble monuments of the wealthy in the high ground, while the poor are buried in crowded, unmarked common graves in the low, damp sections. This system is held together by a philosophy that you hear repeated in sermons and read in popular magazines. It is the idea of the great chain of being. The belief is that everyone has a station in life, appointed by a higher power. To be content in your station is a virtue. To struggle against it is a form of vanity or even rebellion. There is a sense of comfort in this for some, a feeling that the world is orderly and predictable. If you know your place, you know your duties. You know who to bow to, and you know who should tip their cap to you. But as you watch the smoke rise from the 1,000 chimneys of the city, you sense a tension beneath the surface. The Industrial Revolution is minting new millionaires every year, men who have more gold than any earl but who still eat with the wrong fork. The working classes are beginning to organize, to read, and to demand a voice in the government that their labor supports. The taxonomy is under pressure. The rigid lines are beginning to blur, even if the people on the street still cling to them with a desperate, white-knuckled grip. You turn a corner and see a massive, soot-stained building, a temple of commerce where hundreds of clerks are hunched over ledgers. This is the heartbeat of the empire. Here, class is a matter of ink and paper, of who has the authority to sign a check and who must wait in the outer office. You realize that to live with these rules is to live in a state of constant observation. You are always being judged. You are always being categorized. Whether it is the quality of your lace, the shine on your boots, or the way you hold your teacup, every detail is a piece of evidence in the trial of your social standing. You take a deep breath of the cold, metallic air and continue your walk, feeling the weight of the invisible layers of society pressing down on everyone around you. The taxonomy is not just a list of titles. It is the very air the Victorians breathe, as necessary and as suffocating as the fog that now begins to roll in from the river, swallowing the distinctions between the silk and the rags, at least until the sun rises again. You step out of your carriage and onto the damp pavement of a London afternoon. The fog we spoke of earlier has settled into the crevices of the stone buildings, but here, in the fashionable districts of Mayfair or Belgravia, the world feels meticulously ordered despite the gray mist. You adjust your gloves, ensuring the kid leather is smooth against your skin, and you reach into your pocket or your silk-lined reticule. Your fingers find a small, hard object, your card case. This little box, perhaps carved from shimmering mother-of-pearl, polished tortoiseshell, or engraved silver, is your most potent weapon in the social wars of the Victorian era. Inside it lies a stack of small rectangles of pasteboard. These are your calling cards. To a modern eye, they look like simple business cards, but to you, living in this world of rigid hierarchies, they are your social currency. They are the keys that unlock the doors of the powerful, or the barriers that keep the unworthy at bay. You approach the heavy, dark wood door of a grand townhouse. You are not here for a long chat or a dinner party. You are performing a ritual known as the morning call, though it is currently 3 o'clock in the afternoon. In the upside-down logic of Victorian high society, the morning lasts until you eat dinner in the evening. As you stand before the door, you feel the weight of 1,000 unspoken rules. If you are a woman, your card is slightly larger, a square of fine, unglazed white paper. If you are a man, your card is smaller and more rectangular, designed to fit easily into the breast pocket of a frock coat. The text on the card is simple, just your name, perhaps preceded by Mr., Mistress, or a title like Captain or Lady. There is no phone number, no address unless you are a gentleman of high standing, and certainly no flashy graphics. The font must be a delicate copperplate engraving. To have your cards printed from a common press instead of engraved from a copperplate would be a social disaster. It would signal to everyone who holds the card that you are a person of low breeding, someone who does not understand the fine distinctions of quality. You reach for the heavy brass knocker and give a sharp, confident rap. You wait. The silence of the street is broken only by the distant clip-clop of horses and the muffled cries of a street vendor several blocks away. Then the door opens. You are not greeted by the mistress of the house, but by a stony-faced footman or a butler in a crisp white cravat. He does not smile. He does not invite you in. He simply stands there, holding a silver salver, a small tray polished to a mirror finish. This is the moment of truth. You place your card onto the silver tray. If you are a woman calling on another woman, you leave 1 card. If she is married, you leave 3, 1 of your own for the mistress and 2 of your husband's cards, 1 for the mistress and 1 for the master of the house. A lady never leaves a card for a gentleman. That would be a scandalous breach of modesty, suggesting a level of intimacy that is strictly forbidden. The butler looks at the cards. He knows exactly who you are by the quality of the paper and the name engraved there. Now comes the social performance known as the not at home. The butler might tell you that the mistress is not at home. And he knows that that the mistress is likely sitting just upstairs in her drawing room, perhaps sipping tea or reading a novel. She might even be looking down at you from behind the lace curtains of the second-floor window. But not at home does not mean she is physically absent from the building. It is a polite code. It means she is not receiving callers today. Perhaps she is tired, perhaps she is busy, or perhaps, most chillingly, she does not wish to add you to her circle of acquaintances. You do not take offense. To show frustration would be terribly middle class. You simply nod, leave your cards on the tray, and turn away. You have performed your duty. You have paid your respects. The act of leaving the card is recorded in the social ledger of the household. However, if the butler bows slightly and says the mistress is in, a different set of rules begins. You are led through the hall, past the heavy mahogany furniture and the scent of floor wax and lilies, into the drawing room. This is the inner sanctum of Victorian social life. You are expected to stay for no less than 15 minutes and no more than 30. You must keep your gloves on. If you are a man, you must carry your hat and your cane into the room with you. To leave them in the hall would suggest that you feel too much at home, as if you are part of the family rather than a formal guest. You sit on the edge of a velvet-upholstered chair, making polite, inconsequential conversation about the weather, the latest exhibition at the Royal Academy, or the health of mutual friends. You avoid any topic that is too deep, too political, or too personal. This is a dance of surfaces. But let us look closer at the card you left behind, because the card itself can speak a secret language. Look at the corners. If you have folded the upper right-hand corner of your card, it tells the recipient that you have come in person. It is a sign of greater respect than if you had simply sent your servant to drop the card off. If you fold the upper left corner, it means you are offering congratulations. A fold in the lower left corner signifies a farewell, often used when you are leaving town for a season. This is known as the pour prendre congé card, or to take leave. A fold in the lower right corner is a sign of condolence. By simply pinching a piece of cardstock, you communicate complex emotions and social intentions without having to say a single word. The cards that are left on that silver tray in the hallway serve another purpose as well. They are a trophy gallery. When other guests arrive, they will glance at the tray to see who else has been calling on this house. If the tray is filled with the cards of dukes, earls, and famous socialites, it tells every visitor that this is a house of high standing. Sometimes, a mistress might even leave the cards of her most prestigious visitors on top of the pile for a few days longer than usual, just to ensure they are seen. It is a subtle but ruthless form of social signaling. Why go through all this trouble? Why not just knock and ask to see a friend? Because the calling card is the ultimate gatekeeping device. It protects the privacy of the Victorian home, which was seen as a sacred refuge from the chaotic, industrializing world outside. Without the card system, anyone could walk up to your door and demand your time. The card allows you to filter your social world. It allows you to build a network of alliances while keeping the wrong sort of people at a distance. If someone leaves a card and you do not return the call by leaving your own card at their house within a week or two, you have sent a clear message. The acquaintance is over. You have dropped them. In the Victorian world, being dropped is a quiet death. You will no longer be invited to the dinners, the balls, or the garden parties. You will become a ghost in your own neighborhood. As you walk back to your carriage, the mist feeling a bit colder now, you realize that your entire social identity is wrapped up in those little white rectangles. They dictate who you can talk to, where you can go, and how the world perceives your worth. Every time you hand a card to a butler, you are placing your reputation in his hands. You are participating in a system that prizes form over substance, a system where a bent corner or a slightly too large font can be the difference between social success and total isolation. The ritual of the calling card is just one layer of the Victorian armor. It is the first line of defense in a society that is terrified of disorder. By controlling who enters the home and under what circumstances, the Victorians created a sense of stability in a rapidly changing world. But as you climb back into your carriage and the door clicks shut, you might wonder about the people who have no cards. The people who would never be allowed to touch that silver salver, the ones whose names will never be engraved on fine pasteboard. For them, The heavy oak doors of these townhouses are not just closed, they are invisible. The card is a key for some, but for most it is a lock. The carriage pulls away, the wheels grinding against the stones, leaving behind the silent houses and their trays of white cards, each one a tiny, paper monument to the power of etiquette. You step out of the carriage and into the warmth of a crowded Victorian ballroom. The air is a thick mixture of beeswax candles, expensive perfumes, and the faint, metallic scent of floor polish. Everywhere you look, there is movement. Silk skirts rustle like dry leaves, and the low hum of polite conversation creates a steady background noise that seems to vibrate in your chest. At first glance, everything appears perfectly proper. Men in stiff white collars and black coats stand straight, while women in elaborate gowns glide across the floor with practiced grace. But if you look closer, if you learn to see past the formal smiles and the rigid posture, you will realize that the room is shouting. In this world where a young man and a young woman are rarely left alone, where every spoken word is monitored by a watchful mother or a stern aunt, the silence has become a language of its own. You are living in an age of intense repression, but human nature does not simply disappear because the rules are strict. It just becomes more creative. Because you cannot always say what you feel, you have learned to speak through the objects you carry. You have learned to turn a piece of folded silk or a small cluster of garden blossoms into a sophisticated telegraph system. This is the world of silent codes, a hidden layer of reality where a flick of the wrist or the choice of a flower can mean the difference between a lifetime of happiness and a crushing social scandal. Consider the fan you are holding in your hand. To a modern eye, it is a simple tool for cooling yourself in a hot, crowded room. But to you, it is a weapon and a messenger. You have spent hours practicing its use in front of your bedroom mirror until the movements are as natural as breathing. If you carry your fan in your right hand and hold it in front of your face, you are telling a particular gentleman across the room that you are looking for his acquaintance. If you draw it slowly across your cheek, you are whispering a confession of love that your lips are not allowed to utter. But if you should happen to draw it across your forehead, you are warning him that you are being watched by someone dangerous. The fan is a delicate instrument of power. If you are angry, you close it with a sharp, sudden snap that echoes like a small pistol shot. If you are feeling shy, you hide your eyes behind the half-open slats, peeking through the lace to see if he is looking back at your way. Should you drop the fan entirely, you are not being clumsy. You are telling the man who rushes to pick it up that you only wish to be friends. Every tilt, every flutter, and every resting position has a meaning that everyone in the room understands, yet no one acknowledges out loud. It is a public conversation held in total secrecy, a way to navigate the treacherous waters of courtship without ever breaking a single rule of etiquette. But the fan is only the beginning. As you move through the ballroom and out toward the moonlit terrace, you notice the small bouquets pinned to lapels or held in trembling hands. These are not just decorations. This is the language of flowers or floriography, a complex system of symbolism that has become an obsession in your society. You have a small book on your bedside table that lists hundreds of different plants and their hidden meanings, and you have memorized them all. Imagine receiving a small, circular bouquet, known as a tussie-mussy, from a secret admirer. You do not just look at the colors. You read them. If you see a red rose, the message is clear and classic. It signifies love. But if the rose is white, it speaks of innocence and secrecy. A yellow rose is a dangerous thing to send, for it represents jealousy or a decrease in love. If your bouquet contains a striped carnation, your heart sinks, for that is a polite but firm refusal of your affections. However, if you find a sprig of blue violets, you smile, because you know he is promising to be faithful to you. The way the flowers are presented matters just as much as the species themselves. If a man hands you a rose with the thorns still attached, he is expressing both love and the pain it brings him. If he hands it to you with the thorns removed, he is telling you that there is nothing but hope in his heart. If you take a flower and pin it to your heart, you are signaling that his feelings are returned. But if you pin it to your hair, it is a sign of caution. You might even communicate a simple yes or no through the bouquet. If you receive a flower and hand it back with the right hand, you are saying yes. If you use your left hand, it is a definitive no. In a world where a direct question might be considered improper, these blossoms allow for a level of emotional honesty that is otherwise impossible. As you walk back into the main hall, you notice the subtle play of glances and the movement of other accessories. Even something as mundane as a pair of gloves or a lace handkerchief can be drafted into service. If you drop your handkerchief, it is a deliberate invitation for a conversation. If you fold it carefully and press it to your cheek, you are saying that you love the person watching you. If you draw it across your lips, you are asking for a more intimate connection. But perhaps the most powerful tool of all is the eye. In the Victorian world, the gaze is highly regulated. A young lady is expected to keep her eyes lowered, displaying a modest and retiring nature. To look a man directly in the face for too long is considered bold, perhaps even scandalous. But in the brief moments when a chaperone turns her head, or during the frantic energy of a dance, those eyes come alive. There is the lingering look that lasts just a fraction of a second too long, the quick sidelong glance that says "I see you," and the slow, deliberate closing of the lids that signals exhaustion with the social game. You learn to read the room not by what people are doing, but by where they are looking. You see the silent stories playing out in every corner, the quiet tragedies of unrequited love, and the hidden triumphs of secret engagements, all conducted without a single sound. This obsession with silent codes exists because the stakes of Victorian life are incredibly high. For a woman, her reputation is her only currency. A single misunderstood word or an overly familiar gesture could lead to social ruin, making her unmarriageable and casting a shadow over her entire family. For a man, the pressure to be a gentleman means maintaining a mask of stoic composure at all times. These codes provide a safety valve. They allow for the expression of intense human emotion within the rigid framework of social order. They create a space where you can be yourself, even if only through the way you hold a flower or flick a fan. The atmosphere is one of constant tension. You are always performing, always aware that you are being judged. You feel the weight of the silk on your shoulders and the tightness of the corset against your ribs, reminding you of the boundaries you must not cross. But within those boundaries, there is a strange kind of freedom. There is a thrill in the secret message, a rush of adrenaline when you see a specific flower in a bouquet or a certain movement of a fan across the room. It is a game of high stakes and deep intuition. As the night begins to wind down and the musicians pack away their instruments, you realize that you are exhausted. Not just from the dancing, but from the constant mental effort of translating the world around you. You have spent hours reading a language that has no alphabet and no spoken words. You have navigated a complex web of desires and denials, all hidden behind a veneer of perfect politeness. You walk toward the cloakroom to retrieve your wrap, feeling the cool night air begin to seep into the hall. As you pass a young couple standing near the door, you notice the girl tilt her fan just so, resting it against her right ear. You know what that means. She is telling the young man that he has changed. Perhaps he has offended her, or perhaps he has simply become more interesting. Whatever the case, the conversation is finished for the night, but the silent dialogue will continue tomorrow in the park, in the church pews, and across the dinner tables of the city. You step out into the darkness, the sounds of the ballroom fading behind you. The world of silent codes follows you into the street, a phantom language that haunts every interaction. You realize that in this society, silence is never truly empty. It is filled with the ghosts of everything that cannot be said, written in the language of fans, flowers, and glances. You pull your cloak tighter, feeling the weight of the secrets you carry, knowing that in the morning, the dance of the unspoken will begin all over again. The morning sun filters through the heavy lace curtains of the morning room, casting intricate, web-like shadows across the patterned carpet. You sit at a small mahogany table, your back perfectly straight, your fingers nimble as you work a piece of embroidery. The room is quiet, save for the rhythmic, metallic click of knitting needles coming from the corner. That sound belongs to your Aunt Agatha. But today, she is not merely your relative. She is your shadow. She is your silent judge. She is your chaperone. You feel the weight of her presence even without looking up. In the Victorian world, a young woman of your standing is never truly alone. From the moment you emerged from the nursery to the moment you are safely handed over to a husband, your life is a series of supervised encounters. To be alone with a man, even for 5 minutes, is to invite a scandal that could stain your name forever. The chaperone is the guardian of your virtue, the human wall between you and the prying eyes of a judgmental society. But to you, she often feels like a tether, pulling you back every time you wish to lean forward. Imagine you are preparing for a walk in the park. You cannot simply pull on your bonnet and step out of the front door. You must wait. You wait for your mother, your aunt, or perhaps a trusted married friend to gather her gloves and her parasol. You walk down the street, and she is there, 2 paces behind you, a silent observer of every person you greet and every shop window you linger over. If a gentleman acquaintance happens to cross your path and tips his hat, the chaperone is the one who determines the length of the conversation. Polite nod is acceptable. A brief inquiry after one's health is tolerated. But should the conversation drift into anything more personal or prolonged, you will feel a firm hand on your elbow or hear a pointed, dry cough that signals it is time to move on. The chaperone is an expert in the language of the unspoken. She knows that a lingering gaze can be just as scandalous as a forbidden letter. Her eyes are trained to catch the slight flush in your cheeks or the way your pulse quickens at the sight of a certain waistcoat. You are a commodity in the marriage market, and she is the security guard ensuring the goods remain pristine. It sounds cold, almost transactional, but in your world, a woman's reputation is her only currency. If it is spent or tarnished, she loses everything. There are no second chances. Think about the physical toll of this constant observation. You are never off duty. Even in the supposed privacy of your own drawing room, if a suitor comes to call, the chaperone sits in the corner with her needlework. She does not join the conversation, but she hears every word. You and the young man sit on opposite sides of the room, discussing the latest poetry or the weather, while the silent click, click, click of the knitting needles marks the passing of time. You want to ask him what he truly thinks of the world, or perhaps tell him a secret that makes you laugh, but you cannot. You must speak in platitudes. You must keep your voice at a level that is audible but not unladylike. You are performing a play for an audience of one, and that one person is watching for the slightest stumble in your lines. This lack of privacy creates a strange, heightened tension. Because you cannot speak freely, every small gesture takes on a massive significance. The way he hands you a teacup, the briefest brush of fingers as you exchange a book, the tilt of a head. These are the things you will replay in your mind later that night, wondering if they meant what you hoped they meant. The chaperone sees these things too, and her presence ensures that they remain small, fleeting, and deniable. She is the ice that cools the fire of youthful impulse. You might wonder why a woman would agree to be a chaperone. Often, these women are widows or unmarried relatives who have no means of support of their own. By acting as a guardian for a younger woman, they maintain their own place in the social hierarchy. It is a position of power, however small. They are the gatekeepers. A chaperone can make or break a match simply by the reports she gives to your father. If she deems a suitor improper or notices a lack of decorum, that suitor may find himself no longer invited to tea. You are at her mercy, even as she serves you. As the afternoon wanes, you prepare for a ball. This is the ultimate test of the chaperone's endurance. While you are dancing under the glittering chandeliers, she will be sitting among the rows of older women on the perimeter of the room. These are the dowagers, the formidable ladies in heavy silks and dark velvets who watch the dance floor like hawks. They know the history of every family in the room. They know whose fortune is failing and whose son is a gambler. When your dance partner leads you back to your seat, you must return directly to your chaperone. You cannot wander off into the conservatory for a breath of fresh air. You cannot linger in a dark hallway. You are returned to the safety of the fold, under the watchful eye of the woman who will ensure your dance card is filled only by respectable men. You feel the heat of the room, the scent of hundreds of candles and floral perfumes, and the overwhelming desire to just be yourself for a single moment. But you cannot. You sit, you fan yourself, and you wait for the next approved interaction. Even your letters are not entirely your own. If you wish to write to a friend, or heaven forbid, a gentleman, the chaperone is often there to oversee the process. In many households, your correspondence is subject to inspection. A hidden note, a slipped piece of paper, a secret delivery. These are the tools of the desperate and the romantic, but they are also the fastest way to ruin. You have heard the stories of girls who were sent away to the countryside or forced into hushed marriages because a letter was intercepted. The fear of that discovery sits in the back of your mind like a cold weight. You look at Aunt Agatha now, her head bowed over her wool. She seems so still, so harmless. But you know that if you were to stand up and walk toward the door without an explanation, she would be on her feet before you reached the handle. She is not just a person. She is the personification of the rules you live by. She is the physical manifestation of the idea that a woman cannot be trusted with her own heart or her own body. This constant surveillance breeds a certain kind of cleverness. You learn to speak with your eyes. You learn to use the language of flowers or the specific movement of a fan to say the things you cannot voice aloud. If you hold your fan to your right cheek, it means yes. If you draw it across your forehead, it means we are being watched. You create a secret world within the visible one, a subterranean layer of communication that happens right under the chaperone's nose. It is a dangerous game, but it is the only way to feel a sense of agency in a life that is otherwise entirely choreographed. As the sun begins to set and the shadows in the morning room grow long, Aunt Agatha finally puts down her knitting. She looks at you, her expression unreadable, and tells you it is time to dress for dinner. You stand, your muscles stiff from hours of sitting properly. You follow her out of the room, feeling the invisible thread that connects you to her, a thread that will not be cut until you are standing at the altar. You realize that you don't even know what she thinks about, or if she ever felt the same stifling weight when she was your age. To you, she is only the watchman. And as you climb the stairs to your room, you wonder if one day you will be the one sitting in the corner, clicking your needles, watching a girl who looks just like you, waiting for her to make a mistake. You find yourself standing in a room that smells of old parchment, cold tea, and the faint metallic scent of iron gall ink. This is not the airy drawing room where you practiced your scales on the piano or the garden where you carefully cultivated your reputation. This is a solicitor's office, a place of heavy oak furniture and floor-to-ceiling shelves packed with leather-bound volumes. Here, the soft whispers of romance are silenced by the scratch of a quill. You are about to learn that in the Victorian world, love is a beautiful embroidery, but the fabric it is stitched upon is a cold, hard legal contract. You look across the desk at your father and the man who wishes to be your husband. They are not talking about your shared love for poetry or the way your eyes sparkle in the candlelight. They are talking about numbers. They are talking about the ledger. In this society, you are a precious jewel, yes, but you are also a form of currency. Your value has been meticulously calculated from the moment you were born. Your education, your grace, your family connections, and most importantly, your dowry, are all entries in a spiritual and financial balance sheet. As you sit there, you feel the weight of the air. It is thick with the realization that your marriage is the most significant business transaction you will ever be a part of. To the Victorians, the heart was never meant to beat alone. It was always meant to be tethered to a ledger. You watch the solicitor slide a thick stack of papers across the desk. This is your marriage settlement. It is a document designed to navigate the treacherous waters of Victorian law, specifically a concept that haunts every woman in the room, even if she does not know its name, coverture. You listen as the solicitor explains the terms. Under the eyes of the law, once you say those two words, I do, you and your husband become one person. But the cruel irony is that in the eyes of the law, that one person is him. You, as an individual legal entity, will effectively cease to exist. Your property, your earnings, and even your very identity will be folded into his. This is why these papers on the desk are so vital. They are the only things standing between you and total legal invisibility. Your father is fighting for a trust, a way to ensure that some of your family money remains yours, or at least remains available to support you if the man sitting next to him turns out to be less than the gentleman he appears to be. You feel a chill as you realize that this contract is your safety net. You are being traded from the protection of one man to another, and the terms of that trade must be precise. If your husband-to-be were to gamble away his fortune, or if he were to prove cruel, these papers are your only shield. You see the suitor nod, his face a mask of polite agreement, but you wonder what he is thinking as he looks at the figures representing your worth. Is he seeing a partner, or is he seeing an investment that will allow him to expand his estate or clear his family debts? The Victorian social rule is clear. Love should follow interest. It is considered reckless, even immoral, to marry for love alone if it means a descent into poverty. You have been taught that a good match is one where the hearts and the bank accounts are in perfect alignment. To do otherwise would be to fail your family and your future children. You are expected to be practical. You are expected to look at the man across from you not just as a soulmate, but as a provider, a protector, and a legal master. You walk out of the office and back into the bright sunlight of the street, but the world looks different now. Every couple you see passing in their carriages or walking arm in arm is bound by these same invisible chains of ink and law. You realize that the courtship rituals you endured, the flowers, the dances, and the stolen glances, were all a beautiful facade for this moment of negotiation. The Victorian world thrives on this duality. On the surface, it is all sentiment and morality. Beneath the surface, it is all about the preservation of wealth and the solidification of class. Consider the engagement ring on your finger. To you, it is a symbol of a promise. To society, it is a public announcement of a pending contract. If you were to break this engagement now, you could be sued for breach of promise. You could be taken to court and forced to pay for the damage done to the gentleman's reputation and his expectations. Your heart is not just your own. It is a legal asset. If you withdraw it without a legally sound reason, you are treated like a merchant who has failed to deliver promised goods. The shame would be public and the financial cost could be ruinous. You return home and see your mother waiting for you. She looks at you with a mixture of pride and a strange, lingering sadness. She knows what is in those papers. She has lived under a marriage settlement for decades. She understands that your life is about to become a series of balances. You will have to balance your husband's moods, his finances, and his expectations against your own needs. You will have to navigate a world where you have no right to your own children if the marriage fails, where you cannot sign a contract or own a business without his consent. You go to your room and look at your reflection. You are a Victorian bride-to-be, a figure of romance and purity, but you also feel like a clerk in the great office of social standing. You begin to understand why your parents were so strict about who you spoke to and where you went. They were protecting their investment. They were ensuring that when the time came to open the ledger, your page would be clean and your value would be high. The rules of the heart are governed by the rules of the drawing room, and the rules of the drawing room are written by the men in the solicitor's office. You realize that your freedom is a very narrow hallway. You have the freedom to choose within a very small circle of acceptable candidates, and once that choice is made, the door locks behind you. The contract is signed. The seal is pressed into the wax. You spend the evening writing letters of thanks for engagement gifts, but your mind keeps drifting back to the scratch of that quill. You think about the women who have no marriage settlements, the ones who marry for love and find themselves at the mercy of a man who can legally take every penny they earn by washing clothes or sewing. You realize how lucky you are to have a ledger that protects you, even as it defines you. As the days pass and the wedding approaches, the atmosphere in your house shifts. It is no longer about the joy of a new union. It is about the logistics of a merger. The guest list is a map of social influence. The gifts are tallied and displayed like trophies. You are the center of it all, yet you feel strangely sidelined. The contract has been moved from the solicitor's desk to the altar, and soon, it will be moved to the history books of your family. You realize that to live with Victorian social rules is to live in a world where every emotion has a price tag and every relationship is a negotiation. You are taught to guard your heart not because it is fragile, but because it is valuable property. You are taught to be charming because charm increases your market share. You are taught to be silent because silence is a sign of a well-managed household. The sun begins to set, casting long shadows across your bedroom floor. You think about the years ahead. You will be a wife, a mother, and a mistress of a house. You will manage the servants and the social calendar. You will be the moral compass of your home. But you will always know in the back of your mind that your security rests on those pieces of parchment in the heavy oak office. You are a partner in a firm where you have no vote, a shareholder in a life where the dividends are paid in social standing rather than self-determination. You pick up a book of poetry, trying to find the romance you once believed in. But the words feel different now. When the poet speaks of eternal devotion, you wonder about the marriage settlement of his muse. When he speaks of hearts beating as one, you think of the legal merging of identities. The immersive world of Victorian romance is inextricably linked to the cold reality of Victorian economics. You cannot have one without the other. You close your eyes and try to imagine a world where love is not a contract, where a woman's identity is not a gift to be granted or taken away by a husband. But that world is far in the future. For now, you must live by the rules of the heart and the ledger. You must play your part in the great social theater, knowing that your lines have been written for you by generations of tradition and legal precedent. As you prepare for bed, you look at the heavy wardrobe in the corner of your room. It is filled with the silks and linens of your trousseau, all bought and paid for as part of the agreement. Each dress is a stitch in the contract. Each ribbon is a clause in the ledger. You realize that you are not just a woman falling in love. You are a woman entering into the most binding agreement of her life. And as you blow out the candle, the last thing you see is the silhouette of your writing desk, a reminder that in your world, the pen is just as powerful, and often much colder, than the heart. The morning light filters through the heavy velvet curtains of your bedroom, casting long, dusty shadows across the floorboards. You have only just woken, yet the weight of the day is already pressing down on you. It is a weight that is not merely psychological but physical. Before you can face the world, before you can speak to your family or step out onto the street, you must be encased. You must be built. In the Victorian world, a person is not born, they are constructed from layers of linen, silk, wool, and bone. You stand by the bed, shivering slightly in the morning chill, as the ritual begins. This is not just a matter of getting dressed. This is the process of putting on your armor. If you are a woman of this era, your transformation starts with the chemise. It is a simple, lightweight garment of white linen or cotton, designed to protect your skin from the harsh materials that will soon follow. But the simplicity ends there. Next come the stockings, held up by garters, and then the drawers. But these are just the foundation. The true core of your identity for the next 14 hours is resting on the chair beside you. It is a construction of heavy coutil fabric, reinforced with channels of vertical steel or, more traditionally, strips of baleen taken from the jaws of a whale. We call it a corset, but to you it is a second skeleton. You wrap it around your waist and hook the metal busk at the front. Then you turn your back to the mirror or your maid. You feel the laces begin to tighten. It is a slow, methodical pull. You feel your ribs being guided inward, your posture forced into an unnatural, unyielding verticality. It is not necessarily the agonizing torture that future myths will claim, but it is a constant, nagging presence. It dictates how you breathe, which is to say, shallowly into the upper lobes of your lungs. It dictates how you sit, because slouching is now a physical impossibility. Most importantly, it dictates how you are perceived. A woman without a corset is considered a woman of loose character. To be unlaced is to be morally suspect. The rigidity of your torso is a physical manifestation of your rigid adherence to social law. But the corset is only the beginning. Over it goes the corset cover, and then the first of many petticoats. If it is winter, you might start with a layer of red flannel for warmth. Then comes the crinoline, that massive cage of spring steel hoops that gives your skirt its bell-like shape. As you step into the center of it and pull it up to your waist, the world around you suddenly becomes distant. You have created a physical barrier between yourself and everyone else. You cannot stand too close to a fire, for the steel will heat and the fabric might ignite. You cannot pass through a narrow doorway without a graceful, practiced tilt of your hips. You cannot even sit in a standard chair without the back of the hoop tilting upward in the front. a constant challenge to your modesty. The weight of it all is staggering. By the time you add the final gown, with its yards of heavy silk or wool, its elaborate trimmings of fringe, lace, and jet beads, you are carrying anywhere from 10 to 20 pounds of clothing. Your movements are no longer your own. You do not walk, you glide, the hidden wheels of your feet moving beneath the swaying mountain of your skirts. Every gesture is slowed. Every step is calculated. You are a walking monument to the wealth of your father or husband, a living testament to the fact that you do not need to perform manual labor. You are encased in lace and whalebone, protected from the world, but also trapped by it. If you are a man, your armor is less voluminous but no less restrictive. Your transformation begins with the shirt, but the most important part is the collar. It is not attached to the shirt, but is a separate, stiffly starched piece of linen that you must stud into place. These collars are so rigid they feel like polished wood against your neck. They are designed to keep your head high and your gaze forward. If you try to look down, the sharp edge of the starch bites into your throat. It is a constant reminder to maintain your dignity. You cannot be a man of commerce or a man of the professions if your collar is wilted. A soft collar is for a laborer, but a stiff, upright neck is the sign of a gentleman. Next comes the waistcoat, cinched tight to create a smooth, lean silhouette, and finally the frock coat or the morning coat. The wool is heavy and dark, usually black, charcoal, or navy. It is designed to broaden your shoulders and narrow your waist. When you pull on your trousers, you notice they have no creases, for the modern trouser press has not yet become a staple. You pull on your leather boots, which are buttoned or laced tight around your ankles, providing a sturdy foundation for your upright trek through the city. Finally, you reach for your hat. For a gentleman, the top hat is not merely an accessory. It is a crown. It adds several inches to your height, making you a more imposing figure in the crowded streets. It requires its own set of rules. You must know when to tip it, when to remove it entirely, and how to hold it so as not to appear awkward. To leave the house without a hat is as unthinkable as leaving without your trousers. You are now fully dressed. You are encased in wool and starch, your movements governed by the tightness of your coat and the height of your collar. The physical sensation of being a Victorian is one of constant awareness. You are always aware of your clothes because they never let you forget they are there. For both men and women, the clothing of the 19th century serves as a constant monitor of behavior. You cannot run for a carriage without feeling the strain on your seams or the loss of your breath. You cannot lounge on a sofa because your clothes are not built for lounging. You are held in a state of permanent readiness, a physical manifestation of the era's obsession with self-control. This armor also serves a vital social function. It is a language. Before you even speak a word, your clothes have told everyone your story. The quality of the lace on a lady's sleeve, the shine on a gentleman's boots, the cleanliness of a white cuff, all of these are signals. In a world that is rapidly expanding, where you might encounter hundreds of strangers in a single day on the London streets, your clothing is your identity card. It tells the world that you belong to the respectable classes. It tells them that you have the time to spend hours on your toilette and the money to pay others to wash and starch your linens. But there is a darker side to this armor. It is a barrier to the senses. The Victorian world is one of layers. You are separated from the air by flannel and silk. You are separated from the ground by thick soles and heels. You are separated from other people by the sheer volume of your skirts or the formality of your tailoring. It creates a sense of isolation, a feeling that you are a curated object rather abroad in the world rather than a living, breathing participant in it. The very fabric that protects your reputation also pins you down. It limits your physical freedom in order to preserve your social standing. As you stand before the looking glass one last time, checking the symmetry of your bonnet or the straightness of your cravat, you realize that you have become a part of the architecture of your house. You are as much a decorative and functional element as the carved mahogany sideboard or the draped windows. You are ready to step out into the world of calling cards, stiff bows, and guarded conversations. You feel the squeeze of the stays and the bite of the collar, and strangely, it gives you a sense of security. In a world of strict social rules, your armor tells you exactly who you are and how you must act. You take a final, shallow breath, pick up your gloves, and prepare to face the day, safely hidden behind your walls of lace and whalebone. You move toward the door, the heavy fabric of your life rustling with every measured step, ready to play your part in the grand, elaborate theater of the Victorian afternoon. You stand at the threshold of the dining room, and for a fleeting moment, the sheer scale of the spectacle before you takes your breath away. This is not merely a meal. It is a performance, a high-stakes diplomatic summit, and a complex mathematical equation all rolled into one. The room is bathed in the warm, flickering glow of dozens of beeswax candles, their light reflecting off the polished surface of a mahogany table that seems to stretch into infinity. The air is thick with the scent of lilies, expensive cologne, and the savory promise of a dozen different courses. But you cannot simply walk in and find a chair. That would be a social disaster. You are part of a processional, a rigid line of couples moving in a strict order determined by the invisible but ironclad laws of precedence. You feel the weight of a gentleman's arm beneath your hand, or perhaps you feel the light touch of a lady's fingers on your sleeve. This pairing was not accidental. Your host spent hours agonizing over the seating chart, ensuring that rank, age, and social standing were perfectly balanced. If an earl is present, he leads the way with the hostess. If you are of a lower station, you wait your turn, moving only when the space before you clears. To step out of order is to signal to the entire room that you do not know your place in the world. As you reach your designated chair, do not sit immediately. You wait for the hostess to take her seat, a silent signal that the evening has officially begun. When you finally lower yourself onto the velvet upholstery, you are greeted by a landscape of white damask and shining metal. The table setting is a dense thicket of silver and glass. To your left and right, rows of forks, knives, and spoons are laid out with geometric precision. There might be 12 pieces of cutlery for your use alone, and using the wrong one for the wrong course is the ultimate Victorian nightmare. You remember the golden rule whispered by your mother or your tutor. Work from the outside in. The smallest fork on the far left is for your oysters. The large, heavy spoon on the right is for your soup. But even knowing which tool to use is only half the battle. You must use them with a delicate, almost effortless grace. You are expected to eat as if the act of consumption is a secondary thought, a mere distraction from the sparkling conversation you are meant to be providing. The service you are experiencing is likely what the Victorians called service à la Russe, or service in the Russian style. In earlier decades, all the dishes would have been placed on the table at once for people to help themselves, a chaotic method known as service à la Française. But by the mid to late 19th century, the fashion has shifted. Now, the table remains clear of food, decorated only with elaborate silver centerpieces, flowers, and fruit. The dishes are kept on a sideboard and brought to you one by a small army of footmen who move like ghosts behind the chairs. A plate of soup is placed before you. It is clear, hot, and fragrant. You pick up your spoon, but you do not dip it toward yourself. That would be uncouth. You move the spoon away from you, toward the center of the bowl, capturing a modest amount of liquid before bringing it to your lips. You do not slurp. You do not blow on the liquid to cool it. If it is too hot, you simply wait, watching the steam rise while you engage in the first phase of the evening's conversation. This is where the choreography becomes truly demanding. You are subject to the turn of the table. For the first several courses, you are expected to devote your entire attention to the person sitting on your right. Even if the person on your left is your dearest friend or a famous poet you have long admired, you must ignore them. To leave the person on your right without a conversational partner is a grave insult to the hostess. You discuss the weather, the latest exhibition at the Royal Academy, or the state of the garden. You keep your voice low, your tone pleasant, and your opinions moderate. Then, at a mysterious signal known only to the hostess, the turn occurs. She will turn her head to speak to the person on her other side, and like a row of falling dominoes, every guest at the table must do the same. Suddenly, you must break off your current conversation mid-sentence and find a way to engage your neighbor on the left. It is a social dance that requires constant vigilance. You cannot get lost in your own thoughts, and you certainly cannot get lost in your food. The courses continue to arrive in a relentless parade. After the soup comes the fish. You look down and see a specialized silver knife with a notched blade, designed specifically to lift the delicate flesh away from the bones without crushing it. You handle it with the care of a surgeon. Then comes the entree, perhaps a dish of sweetbreads or a rich ragout, followed by the main roast. This might be venison, mutton, or beef, accompanied by a dizzying array of vegetables. By now, you might be feeling full, but you must pace yourself. To leave a plate untouched is to suggest the food is poor, but to eat every single scrap suggests a vulgar level of hunger. You must find the middle ground, moving through the game course, the salad, and the elaborate sweets. You might encounter asparagus, which poses a unique challenge. In the Victorian dining room, this is one of the few foods you are permitted to eat with your fingers, but only if they are served whole. You pick up a stalk, dip the tip in butter, and bite it off cleanly. You do not, under any circumstances, put the entire stalk in your mouth. Throughout all of this, the servants are a constant, silent presence. They refill your wine glasses, remove your plates, and crumb the table with small silver brushes. You do not thank them. You do not look them in the eye. To the Victorian mind, a perfect servant is an invisible one. They are part of the furniture, necessary for the machinery of the house to function, but entirely outside the social circle of the table. You speak over them as if they are not there, trusting that their professional discretion is as solid as the stone walls of the manor. As the meal nears its end, the tension in the room shifts. The heavy dishes are cleared, and the table is prepared for dessert. Small bowls of scented water, known as finger bowls, are placed before you. You dip the tips of your fingers in the water and pat them dry on your napkin. This is a subtle reminder that despite the opulence, you are still a biological creature with messy needs, though you have done your best to hide it. Then comes the moment of the great separation. The hostess catches the eye of the women at the table. She stands, and as if pulled by an invisible wire, every woman in the room stands with her. The gentlemen rise as well, standing in respectful silence as the ladies file out of the room. This is the transition to the final act of the evening. The women head to the drawing room to share coffee, look at albums of photographs, or play the piano. The men, however, remain. They sink back into their chairs, the atmosphere instantly becoming more relaxed. The servants bring out the port, the brandy, and the cigars. The mahogany table, once covered in damask, is now bare, reflecting the amber light of the fire. In this masculine space, the conversation shifts. The polite trivialities of the dinner table are replaced by talk of politics, business, and sport. The air grows thick with blue tobacco smoke. You lean back, feeling the physical toll of the last 2 hours. Your back is straight, your manners have been impeccable, and you have successfully navigated a minefield of silver and social obligation. You have participated in the choreography of the dinner table, a ritual designed to prove that you belong to the elite, that you possess the self-control and the education required to master these thousands of tiny rules. But the night is not over. Eventually, the host will suggest that you join the ladies. You will stand, smooth your waistcoat, and walk toward the drawing room, leaving the scent of cigars behind. You are moving from one theater to another, ready for the music, the tea, and the final graceful movements of a Victorian evening. The dinner was the heart of the day, a display of wealth and order that reassured everyone present that the world was exactly as it should be, governed by tradition, hierarchy, and the perfect placement of a fish knife. To understand the Victorian home, you must first leave the warmth of the dining room. You step away from the flickering candlelight, the scent of expensive cigars, and the soft murmur of polite conversation. You walk toward a door that looks like any other, but it is covered in thick, green baize cloth to muffle sound. As you push it open and step through, the world changes instantly. The air grows cooler. The smell of lavender and roasted meat is replaced by the sharp tang of lye, the heavy scent of coal dust, and the damp smell of wet stone. You have just crossed the most significant border in the Victorian world. You have entered the engine room. Life below stairs was the foundation upon which every elegant dinner party and every polished social interaction rested. If the upstairs was a stage, the downstairs was the backstage, a place of relentless motion, rigid hierarchy, and a set of social rules that were, in many ways, even more demanding than those of the aristocracy. As you descend the steep, narrow stone steps, your eyes adjust to the dim light of a few flickering gas jets. There are no carpets here to soften your footsteps. There are no silk hangings or gilded frames. Here, everything is functional, hard, and scrubbed clean. You are now part of a massive, silent army. In a large country house, this army might number 40 or 50 people. In a modest city townhouse, it might be just 2 or 3. But regardless of the size, the rules remain the same. The first rule you must learn is the rule of invisibility. This is perhaps the most difficult aspect of Victorian service to grasp today. To be a perfect servant was to be an invisible one. You are expected to perform your duties as if by magic. The coal should appear in the grate, the boots should be polished to a mirror shine, and the table should be set without the family ever actually seeing the process happen. If you find yourself in a hallway and a member of the family or a guest approaches, you do not smile. You do not offer a greeting. You do not even look them in the eye. Instead, you flatten yourself against the wall, keep your eyes cast downward, and wait for them to pass. You are expected to melt into the architecture. To the people living upstairs, you are not quite a person in the traditional sense. You are a function. You are the hands that carry the tray and the feet that answer the bell. Speaking of the bell, listen closely. You can hear it now. In the servants' hall, a long row of bells is mounted high on the wall, each attached to a coiled spring. When a cord is pulled upstairs, the corresponding bell shakes and jingles, and a small numbered card oscillates beneath it. This is the heartbeat of your day. It is a constant, demanding call that dictates your every movement. When that bell rings, you move. It does not matter if you are halfway through your own meager meal or if your legs are aching from 16 hours on your feet. The bell is the voice of the house, and it must be obeyed instantly. Your day begins long before the sun touches the horizon. While the family sleeps in their feathered beds, you are awake at 5 o'clock in the morning. Your first task is the most grueling. You must rake out the cold cinders from the dozens of fireplaces throughout the house. You carry heavy buckets of ash down to the cellar and haul fresh coal back up. Your fingers are permanently stained with black dust, and the skin on your knuckles is cracked and raw. You must scrub the hearths with black lead until they shine, all while being careful not to leave a single smudge on the carpets. You move through the darkened house like a ghost, lighting the fires so that when the family eventually stirs, the rooms are already warm and inviting. But even within this world below stairs, there is a hierarchy as strict as any royal court. You are not all equals here. At the top of the pyramid sit the butler and the housekeeper. The butler is the king of the cellar and the dining room. He carries the keys to the wine, and his word is law among the male staff. He is the one who interacts most with the master of the house, maintaining a mask of perfect, dignified calm. Beside him is the housekeeper, the queen of the linens and the larder. She carries a heavy ring of keys at her waist that jingle as she walks, a constant reminder of her authority. She manages the female servants with an iron hand, ensuring that every sheet is mended and every jar of preserves is accounted for. Below them are the specialized roles. The valet and the ladies' maid occupy a strange middle ground. They are the closest to the family, handling their most intimate secrets and their most expensive clothes. Because they travel with their employers and often dress in their cast-off finery, they are sometimes looked upon with suspicion or envy by the other servants. They live in a world of whispers and high fashion, yet they are still servants, bound by the same invisible walls. Further down the ladder, you find the footmen, chosen for their height and their handsome faces to serve as ornaments of the family's wealth. And then there are the housemaids, the laundry maids, and the kitchen maids. At the very bottom, hidden away in the dampest, darkest corners of the kitchen, is the scullery maid. If you are the scullery maid, your life is a blur of grease, boiling water, and sand. You spend your days scouring heavy copper pots and peeling mountains of potatoes. You are the first to rise and the last to go to bed, often sleeping on a small cot in the kitchen itself. The physical toll of this life is immense. Think about the sheer weight of a Victorian household. You are hauling large ceramic jugs of hot water up 3 flights of stairs so the mistress can wash her face. You are carrying heavy trays of silver and china. You are kneeling on stone floors to scrub them with lye and sand until your knees are calloused and bruised. There are no vacuum cleaners, no washing machines, and no electric lights. Every bit of cleanliness you see upstairs is the result of hours of manual labor below. But the rules are not just about work. They are about the control of your entire life. In many households, no followers is the standing order. This means you are not allowed to have suitors, friends, or family members visit you. Your time belongs entirely to the house. If you are found to be courting, you might be dismissed without a character reference. In the Victorian world, a reference is everything. Without that letter from your previous employer testifying to your honesty, sobriety, and industry, you are unemployable. Being dismissed without a character is often a one-way ticket to the workhouse or the streets. Privacy is a luxury you cannot afford. You likely share a cramped, unheated attic room with 3 or 4 other servants. Your trunk, tucked under your narrow bed, contains everything you own in the world. Perhaps a few letters from home, a spare uniform, and a Bible. This lack of space and time for oneself created a unique community. The servants' hall was a place of gossip, shared grievances, and a complex social life that mirrored the world upstairs. Here, the servants would sit for dinner in their own strict order of precedence. The butler would head the table, and the lowest servants would wait on the higher ones. It was a world within a world, a microcosm of the British Empire. Yet, for all its hardships, life below stairs offered a strange kind of security. In a time of deep poverty and uncertain employment, a position in a good house meant a roof over your head, food in your belly, and a uniform on your back. For a girl from a starving rural village, becoming a scullery maid was a step up in the world. It was a chance to live in a palace, even if she only ever saw the floors of it. As you look around this bustling, shadowy world, you realize that the elegance of the Victorian age was an illusion. The perfectly still, silent rooms upstairs were only possible because of the noise and sweat downstairs. The rigid social rules that dictated how a lady should hold her teacup were enforced by the servant who had spent an hour polishing that cup to a mirror shine. The two worlds were inseparable, bound together by a system of bells and back staircases. One could not exist without the other. The Victorian lady and the scullery maid were two sides of the same coin, both trapped in a system that demanded they play their parts to perfection, regardless of the cost to their own humanity. You step back through the green baize door, and the silence of the upper house swallows you once again. The transition is seamless. The smells of the kitchen vanish, and the air becomes still and scented once more. You see a maid disappearing around a corner, her soft shoes making no sound on the thick carpet. She does not look at you. She is part of the invisible engine, the silent force that keeps this massive, ornate machine of Victorian society running day after grueling day. Without her, and the millions like her, the entire grand performance would come to a grinding, dusty halt. Imagine you are standing on a street corner in the heart of Mayfair, London, in the middle of the afternoon. The air is thick with the scent of coal smoke and horse manure, but here, among the rows of pristine white townhouses, there is an added layer of tension that you can almost taste. It feels like a high-tension wire stretched across the city. You are dressed in your very best. If you are a man, your top hat is brushed until it gleams like obsidian and your collar is so stiff it chafes the skin of your neck. If you are a woman, your corset is pulled tight, reminding you with every breath that you must remain upright, poised, and controlled. You are not just walking down a public street. You are performing. You are navigating a world where your entire life, your financial security, your family's future, and your very identity depend on a single, invisible, and terrifyingly brittle substance. That substance is your reputation. In the Victorian era, they often spoke of a person having a character. To us, character means who you are when no one is looking. To you, in this moment, character is a public commodity. It is a currency. It is a glass armor that protects you from the world. But once it is cracked, it can never truly be mended. You feel the weight of 1,000 eyes. They are watching from the windows behind heavy lace curtains. They are watching from the carriages that rattle past on the cobblestones. They are watching to see who you speak to, how low you bow, and whether your glove is perfectly clean. You decide to make a call. This is the primary work of your social life. You reach into your pocket or your small silk bag and pull out a calling card. This small piece of pasteboard is your passport. You approach the heavy mahogany door of a grand house and ring the bell. When the footman opens the door, you do not simply walk in. You present your card on a silver tray. This is the first test. If the lady of the house wishes to see you, you are admitted into the drawing room. But if the servant tells you that the mistress is not at home, you must accept this with a straight face, even if you can hear the sound of her laughter echoing from the floor above. Not at home is a social code. It might mean she is truly busy, or it might mean that your reputation has a smudge on it that she does not wish to be associated with. If you are a woman, the rules are even more suffocating. You are never truly alone. You walk with a chaperone, perhaps an older aunt or a trusted family friend. Because for a woman to be seen unaccompanied is to invite the most poisonous kind of gossip. You are like a piece of fine porcelain that must be carried in a padded box. One wrong move, one loud laugh in a public park, or one moment of being seen talking too long to a man who is not a relative, and the gossip mills will begin to grind. You can almost hear the whispers in the drawing rooms you visit later that day. They wonder why you were so bold. They wonder if your father is losing control of his household. They wonder if you are the kind of person who can be trusted with an invitation to the next ball. The Victorian drawing room is not a place for relaxation. It is a courtroom. As you sit on the edge of a stiff, brocaded chair, balancing a teacup that feels as heavy as a lead weight, you must navigate the conversation with the skill of a diplomat. You cannot speak of anything too serious, like politics or money, yet you cannot be seen as frivolous or empty-headed. You must master the art of the small talk that carries a hidden edge. You watch for the cut direct. This is the ultimate weapon of the Victorian social elite. Imagine you see someone you know, perhaps a former friend, walking toward you. You prepare your greeting, but as they reach you, they look right through you. They do not nod. They do not blink. They treat you as if you are made of air. To be cut in public is a social execution. It signals to everyone watching that you have been cast out. You are no longer part of the tribe. Why does this matter so much? Why are you so afraid of a few whispers or a cold shoulder? You must understand that in your world, there is no safety net. If you are a man of business and your reputation for honor is questioned, your creditors will call in your debts by morning. If you are a woman and you are labeled as scandalous, you will never marry, or worse, your husband could cast you out, taking your children and your home with him. You would be a pariah, a ghost haunting the edges of the world you once ruled. The stakes are not just about hurt feelings. They are about survival. This fear creates a strange kind of double life. You become an expert at the mask. You learn to hide your anxieties, your grief, and your desires behind a facade of perfect Victorian decorum. You might be crumbling inside, but your posture remains perfect. You might despise the person sitting across from you, but your voice remains honeyed and polite. You are a citizen of a society that prizes the appearance of virtue above almost everything else. This is why the scandals that do break are so explosive. When the glass finally shatters, the shards cut everyone nearby. You walk past a newsstand and see the headlines. They are not about war or policy today. They are about a local merchant who has been caught in a lie, or a lord who has been seen in the wrong part of town after dark. You feel a cold shiver of relief that it is not your name on those pages. But that relief is followed by a fresh wave of anxiety. How long can you keep the glass from breaking? You realize that your neighbors are not just your friends. They are your judges. They are the guardians of the social order, and they are just as terrified as you are. Think about the physical toll this takes on you. The way you hold your shoulders. The way you choose every word as if you are testifying under oath. You are constantly monitoring your own behavior and the behavior of those around you. You look for the subtle signs of a fall from grace. Is that lady wearing a dress that is a bit too bright for her age? Is that gentleman standing a little too close to the gambling table? You are part of a massive, unspoken agreement to police one another. You are both the prisoner and the warden. As the sun begins to set over the London rooftops, casting long, distorted shadows across the street, you turn toward home. You pass a servant scrubbing the front steps of a house. You remember that even those below you are watching. A scandal in the master's house means the servants lose their positions too. The fragility of reputation binds the highest lord and the lowest scullery made together in a web of mutual dread. You reach your own door and take one last look at the street. You have survived another day without a crack in your armor. You step inside, the heavy door closing out the world. But even here, you cannot truly relax. The expectations of the Victorian age follow you into the hallway, up the stairs, and into your very dreams. You are a creature of the glass, living in a world where a single stone of gossip can bring the entire glittering structure crashing down around your ears. You wonder, as you blow out your candle, if the person you pretend to be is the only person who truly exists anymore. The performance never ends. Cannot end because the moment the curtain falls, you are nothing. You are just another soul lost in the fog, without a character to call your own. The weight of it stays with you, a silent companion in the dark, reminding you that tomorrow, the eyes will be waiting again, ready to catch the slightest shimmer of a fracture in your perfect, fragile life. Questioning yourself, you realize that this is the true price of your place in the world. You are safe as long as you are perfect, and in the Victorian age, perfection is a cage that you have learned to love because the alternative is far too frightening to imagine. You close your eyes, already rehearsing your bows and your smiles for the morning, a prisoner of the glass. The morning light does not sparkle as it did yesterday. Instead, it filters through heavy, drawn curtains, casting long and somber shadows across the floorboards of your home. The transition from the vibrant, breathless world of the social season to the quiet, suffocating stillness of morning is as sudden as a candle being snuffed out in a drafty hallway. You are no longer preparing for a ball. You are preparing for the long, slow performance of grief, a ritual that the Victorian world has perfected into a rigid and demanding art form. As you move through the house, you notice the physical transformation of your surroundings. It is not just your heart that feels heavy. The very furniture seems to be participating in the sorrow. The mirrors in the hallway have been covered with black crepe. This is not merely a stylistic choice. You have been told since childhood that a mirror left uncovered in a house of death might trap the soul of the departed, or worse, the next person to look into the glass might find themselves the next to follow the deceased into the grave. You avoid your own reflection, not out of vanity, but out of a deep, culturally ingrained fear that the boundary between the living and the dead has become perilously thin. You walk into your dressing room, and the wardrobe that was once filled with silks of emerald green, royal blue, and delicate rose has been replaced. In their place hangs a sea of black. This is not the shimmering black of a velvet evening gown. This is the matte, light-absorbing black of morning crepe. You reach out and touch the fabric. It is scratchy, stiff, and strangely lifeless. Crepe is a silk that has been treated with heat and chemicals to give it a crimped, dull appearance. It is designed to look like the absence of light, to where it is to announce to every person you pass on the street exactly where you stand in the hierarchy of loss. You are entering what is known as deep mourning. If you are a widow, this stage will last for a full year and a day. You will be draped from head to toe in this weeping crepe. Your face will be hidden behind a heavy veil that reaches almost to your knees. When you breathe, the fibers of the black fabric tickle your nose and throat. It is difficult to see, difficult to speak, and even difficult to draw a full breath. You are a walking monument to the person you have lost. You are expected to withdraw from society entirely. No parties, no theaters, and no visits to friends. You are a ghost among the living, allowed only to venture out to church or to the cemetery. The rules are different for the men in your family, of course. Your brother or your father might wear a black suit and a black band around his hat, but he will return to his club and his business within a few weeks. For you, the expectations are much more taxing. The Victorian era demands that the external appearance of a woman must perfectly reflect the internal state of the family's morality. To shorten your mourning period or to wear a fabric with too much sheen would be a scandal that would follow you for years. It would suggest a lack of devotion, a lightness of character that the neighbors would whisper about over their tea. After a year, you may transition into second mourning. You can finally lift the heavy veil and pin it back. You can trade some of the scratchy crepe for plain black silk or ribbon. But you are still years away from wearing color. Eventually, you will reach half mourning. This is the period where you are allowed to introduce small, muted flashes of color back into your life. You might choose a dress of soft gray, a delicate lavender, or a deep mauve. To you, these colors feel like the first flowers of spring after a long and bitter winter. But even then, you must be careful. If you move too quickly into these shades, you risk being labeled as someone who is eager to forget. You sit at your vanity and open a small, velvet-lined box. Inside lies your jewelry. In the Victorian world, even your ornaments must mourn. You cannot wear diamonds or gold. Instead, you reach for pieces made of jet. This is a type of fossilized coal, hard and intensely black, polished until it has a dull, waxy glow. It is heavy against your skin, a physical reminder of the weight of your obligations. Perhaps you have a brooch made of bog oak or black enamel. But then you pick up a more intimate item. It is a woven bracelet, intricate and delicate, made entirely of hair. It is not just any hair. It is the hair of the person who has passed away. To a modern eye, this might seem morbid, but to you, it is the height of sentimentality. You feel a sense of comfort as the cool, braided strands rest against your wrist. It is a piece of them that remains in the physical world. You might also wear a locket containing a tiny, hand-painted portrait or a photograph of the deceased. In an age where death is a frequent visitor to every household, these objects are the anchors that keep memories from drifting away. You remember the day the photographer came to the house, just hours after the passing occurred. It was a somber, hurried affair. Because the deceased had never had their likeness captured in life, the family felt it was essential to have a post-mortem photograph taken. You watched as the photographer carefully posed the body, perhaps propping the eyes open or painting a faint tint of pink onto the cold cheeks of the photograph later to give the illusion of sleep rather than death. You look at that photograph now, a daguerreotype encased in a folding leather frame. It is the only image you have left. You do not see it as macabre. You see it as a final act of love, a way to defy the finality of the grave. The funeral itself was a grand, theatrical production that nearly bankrupted the estate. You remember the sound of the horses' hooves on the cobblestones, muffled by the black plumes nodding atop their heads. The carriage was a towering structure of carved wood and glass, draped in black velvet. You remember the mutes, those professional mourners hired to stand at the door of the house and walk beside the coffin. They did not speak. They did not cry. They simply stood with long, wooden staves, and sorrowful expressions, providing a sense of gravitas to the proceedings. In your world, a funeral is not just a private goodbye. It is a public demonstration of the family's standing. Even the poorest families in the rookeries will save their pennies for years to ensure they are not buried in a common pit. For a pauper's funeral is the ultimate social disgrace. As you sit in your darkened room, the smell of lilies is overpowering. The flowers are everywhere. Their heavy, sweet scent used to mask the reality of what is happening in the parlor before the burial. You realize that your entire life is now governed by these shadows. Your stationery must have a thick black border. Your handkerchiefs must be hemmed in black. Even your visiting cards must announce your grief before you have uttered a word. This is the art of mourning. It is a heavy, beautiful, and exhausting burden. It is a way for a society that lives in the constant shadow of cholera, consumption, and high infant mortality to make sense of the senseless. By turning death into a series of rituals and a strict code of dress, you feel a sense of control over the uncontrollable. You are not just a person who has lost someone. You are a participant in a grand, cultural performance of remembrance. You stand up, the heavy folds of your black skirts rustling like dry leaves against the carpet. You walk to the window and pull the curtain back just an inch, looking out at the world that continues to move on outside. You see a young couple laughing as they walk toward the park, the girl's yellow dress a shocking bolt of lightning in your dim world. You do not feel resentment. You simply feel the distance between you. You are a citizen of a different country now, the land of the bereaved, where the clocks move slower and the colors have all bled away into the black. You let the curtain fall back into place, returning the room to its proper, respectful gloom. You are a Victorian, and you know that your sorrow is not merely a feeling. It is a duty, a fashion, and a way of life. Imagine you are standing at the base of a very long, very steep staircase. The wood is polished to a mirror shine, reflecting the flickering gaslight from the hallway below. Down there, in the drawing room, there is laughter, the clinking of crystal, and the heavy scent of cigar smoke and expensive perfume. But that world is not your world. You are a child, and in the Victorian era, that means you exist in the margins. You are a small shadow inhabiting the upper reaches of the house. You turn and begin the long climb up to the nursery, where the air is thinner, the furniture is simpler, and the rules are absolute. To understand the Victorian world, you must understand that childhood was not the protected, whimsical playground we imagine today. It was a period of intense molding. You are not a person yet. You are a project. You are a raw piece of clay that must be hammered, smoothed, and fired in the kiln of discipline until you are fit for adult society. This transformation begins the moment you wake up. Your morning starts in a room that is perpetually chilly. Even in a wealthy household, the fires in the nursery are kept low to build character. You are scrubbed with cold water and carbolic soap that smells of disinfectant. Your clothing is a series of restraints. If you are a boy, you might still be wearing dresses if you are very young, but soon you will be moved into stiff suits with high collars that scratch your neck. If you are a girl, your movements are restricted by layers of petticoats and perhaps even a training corset to ensure your posture remains as straight as a ruler. You are taught that your body is something to be controlled, never to be lounged or slumped. Breakfast is a quiet, functional affair. There is no chatter at this table. You eat your porridge or your bread and dripping in silence. The figure who looms over you is not your mother, but your nanny. For a child of the middle or upper classes, the nanny is the center of the universe. She is the lawgiver, the comforter, and the judge. Your parents are distant deities who appear at scheduled intervals. You might see your mother for only 1 hour a day, usually in the late afternoon. This is the children's hour, a highly choreographed performance where you are presented in your cleanest clothes to be admired, questioned briefly on your lessons, and then whisked away before you can become a nuisance. In this world, the most famous rule is one you hear every single day. You must be seen and not heard. This is not just a polite suggestion. It is a social law. Your voice is considered an intrusion upon the adult world. If you speak, it must be because you were spoken to. Your answers must be brief, respectful, and clear. To shout, to cry, or to show too much excitement is a sign of a failed upbringing. You are taught to swallow your emotions. If you are hurt, you do not wail. If you are angry, you do not stomp. You learn to wear a mask of quiet obedience before you even learn your multiplication tables. Now, step outside the nursery and look at the books on your shelf. There is no nonsense here. Victorian children's literature is designed to terrify you into goodness. You read stories about children who told lies and met gruesome ends, or children who were vain and lost everything. The goal of your education is not just to learn facts, but to save your soul. The Victorians believed in original sin, the idea that you were born with a naturally wayward will that had to be broken for your own good. Every lesson, every walk in the park, and every meal is an opportunity for moral instruction. But let us move away from the quiet townhouses and step into the damp, soot-stained streets of the city. If you were a child of the working class, your shadows were much darker. For you, the Victorian social rules were not about where to sit at a dinner table, but how to survive. There was no nursery for you. By the age of 6 or 7, you were an economic unit. You might be a climbing boy, sent up narrow, suffocating chimneys to scrape away the soot with your bare fingernails. You might work in a textile mill, crawling under moving machinery to pick up scraps of cotton because your small body can fit where an adult's cannot. In the factories and the mines, the concept of childhood innocence did not exist. You worked 12-hour shifts. You slept in crowded rooms. Your social rules were defined by the foreman's whistle and the necessity of bringing home a few pennies to keep your family from the workhouse. Yet, even here, the Victorian obsession with character remained. You were expected to be industrious, grateful, and pious. Sunday was not a day of rest for play, but a day for Sunday school, where you were taught that your poverty was a test of your faith and that you must respect your betters. Whether you were in a palace or a slum, the Victorian era was a time of incredible physical danger for children. Disease was a constant companion. Scarlet fever, diphtheria, and consumption could sweep through a nursery or a tenement in days. You would likely lose a sibling or a friend before you reached your 10th birthday. This reality created a strange, morbid atmosphere around childhood. You were taught about death early and often. You might be expected to wear black mourning clothes for months, and you would be taken to see the bodies of deceased relatives to remind you of the brevity of life. The Victorian child lived with the knowledge that they were fragile, a tiny spark that could be extinguished at any moment. But it was not all gloom. Within the cracks of these rigid rules, children found ways to be children. You had your hoops and sticks, your marbles, and your skipping ropes. You had the secret language of the nursery, the games played under the breath when the nanny was looking the other way. You found joy in the simple things, like a sugared almond or a new scrap of ribbon. The very strictness of the world made small freedoms feel like triumphs. As you grow older, the rules only tighten. If you are a boy, you are sent away to a public school where the discipline is even more physical and the social hierarchy is even more brutal. You are taught to be a leader of the empire, which means learning to endure pain without flinching. If you are a girl, your education shifts toward the domestic arts. You learn to sew, to play the piano, and to manage a household. You are being prepared for the only role society truly has for you, the angel in the house. You are taught that your primary duty is to be a source of moral purity for your future husband and children. The transition from childhood to adulthood in the Victorian era is not a gradual fading of rules. It is a hardening. You move from the nursery to the schoolroom and from the schoolroom to the drawing room, and at each stage the expectations grow. You are constantly being watched. Your posture, your tone of voice, your choices of friends, and even your thoughts are subject to the scrutiny of a society that fears disorder above all else. You walk through the park on a Sunday afternoon, holding your father's hand. You are a perfect miniature of an adult. Your coat is buttoned to the chin. Your hat is level. You do not run. You do not point. You do not stare. You greet your father's acquaintances with a polite nod and a soft, "Good afternoon, sir." To the world, you are the picture of Victorian success. You are a well-behaved, well-groomed, silent child. But underneath that stiff wool and the layers of etiquette, there is the heartbeat of a human being. The Victorian child was a creature of immense internal pressure. You were the repository of your parents' ambitions and the embodiment of their status. To fail in your manners was to bring shame upon the entire family. To be a child in this time was to live in a world of profound limitations, where the boundaries of your life were drawn before you were even born. You were a small shadow, waiting for the day you could finally step into the light of the adult world, only to find that the rules there were even more complex than the ones you left behind in the nursery. You step out from the heavy oak door of your townhouse and the night air hits you like a damp shroud. It is London in the late 1800s, and the city does not merely exist, it breathes. It is a thick, rhythmic respiration of coal smoke, river silt, and the metallic tang of the nearby ironworks. Above you, the sky is not black but a bruised purple, choked by the haze of a million chimneys. You adjust the brim of your silk top hat or pull your heavy woolen shawl tighter around your shoulders, feeling the weight of the fabric as a sort of armor. In this world, your clothes are your identity, but tonight, you are hoping they will act as a disguise. As you walk, you hear the rhythmic hiss of the gas lamps. They are new fixtures in your world, tall and iron-wrought, casting orbs of pale, flickering yellow light onto the wet cobblestones. But these circles of light are small and fragile. Between each lamp lies a stretch of profound, impenetrable shadow. This is the Victorian night, a landscape of sharp contrasts where the line between what is seen and what is hidden is as thin as a lace veil. You are moving through a city that is obsessed with the concept of respectability, a word that carries more weight than gold. To be respectable is to be safe. To be respectable is to exist within the light. But as you turn a corner, leaving the grand squares behind for the narrower, winding veins of the city, you realize that almost everyone you know is carrying a secret into the dark. The Victorian era is often remembered for its stiff collars and even stiffer moral codes. You have been taught from birth that your character is a public monument, something to be polished and guarded at all cost. But human nature is not a monument. It is a messy, pulsing thing that does not always fit into the narrow boxes of Sunday sermons and etiquette manuals. This tension has created a society of masks. You are currently living in the golden age of the double life. Think of the men you see in the gentlemen's clubs of Pall Mall during the day. You see them sitting in deep leather armchairs, reading the Times and discussing the progress of the empire with voices full of gravel and authority. They are the pillars of the community. They are husbands, fathers, and vestrymen. Yet, as the clock strikes midnight, many of these same men are navigating a different geography. You might spot one of them now, ducking his head as he enters a nondescript doorway in Haymarket. Inside, the refined air of the parlor is replaced by the smell of cheap gin, stale tobacco, and the copper scent of a boxing ring. Here, the rules of the drawing room do not apply. In these hidden spaces, the aristocrat rubs shoulders with the laborer, and the high court judge places bets on illegal dogfights or spends his earnings in houses of ill repute that the newspapers refuse to mention by name. For a man in your position, the double life is a calculated risk, but it is one supported by a silent cultural agreement. As long as the facade of the home remains unblemished, as long as you are seated in your pew on Sunday morning with your family dressed in their finest blacks and grays, the city is willing to look the other way. There is a specific kind of Victorian hypocrisy that functions as a social lubricant. It allows the wheels of the city to turn. You know that if everyone's private activities were dragged into the gaslight, the entire social structure would collapse like a house of cards. But what about the women? You see a carriage pass by, its wheels splashing through a puddle of dark water. Behind the velvet curtains, a woman sits in silence. For her, the double life is far more dangerous. The social rules you live by are not balanced. While a man might survive a whispered rumor of a late-night excursion, a woman's reputation is like a mirror. Once cracked, it can never be truly mended. Yet, the pressure of the Victorian ideal, the angel in the house who is supposed to be entirely devoid of her own desires or ambitions, is a heavy burden to carry. You know women who lead secret intellectual lives, writing radical pamphlets under male pseudonyms by the light of a single candle after the household has gone to sleep. You know of others who maintain forbidden friendships or attend clandestine meetings of societies that dream of a world where they might actually have a vote or the right to own their own property. For these women, the secret is not a vice but a necessity for survival. Their double lives are lived in the margins of ledgers and the hushed corners of tea rooms. To be caught stepping outside the prescribed path is to face social death, a fate that is often described as worse than the physical kind. As you continue your walk, the fog begins to roll in from the Thames. It is a yellow, sulphurous mist that the locals call a pea souper. It swallows the buildings and muffles the sound of your own footsteps. In this fog, the city feels ghostly, a place where the physical world is dissolving. This is the atmosphere that gave birth to the stories of Sherlock Holmes and the terrifying transformation of Dr. Jekyll into Mr. Hyde. You realize that Jekyll and Hyde is not just a piece of fiction to the people of your time. It is a psychological map of your own existence. Every person you pass, from the flower girl shivering on the corner to the merchant hurrying home, is a Jekyll struggling with a Hyde. The Victorian obsession with the criminal underworld is a reflection of this internal struggle. You find yourself drawn to the broadside ballads and the penny dreadfuls that tell tales of grisly murders and daring robberies in the East End. Why? Because these stories represent the darkness that you are forced to repress in your daily life. The East End of London, with its labyrinthine alleys and overcrowded rookeries, is the physical manifestation of the Victorian shadow self. It is the place where all the things that are forbidden in the West End come to light. It is a place of absolute poverty, but also of a strange, terrifying freedom from the suffocating etiquette of the upper classes. You pass a window where the curtains are not quite drawn. Inside, you see a family gathered for evening prayers. The scene is a portrait of Victorian virtue. The father reads from a large Bible, the mother sits with her hands folded, and the children are statues of obedience. It is beautiful, but you cannot help but wonder what lies beneath the surface. Is the father deeply in debt to a moneylender? Is the mother mourning a life she was never allowed to lead? Are the children terrified of the cane that sits in the corner of the study? The Victorian home is a fortress, designed to keep the world out, but it also keeps the secrets in. The thick rugs muffle the sounds of arguments, and the heavy drapes ensure that no neighbor can see the cracks in the domestic bliss. The very architecture of your life is designed for secrecy. Think of the back stairs in the great houses, the ones used by the servants. They are a parallel universe, a hidden circulatory system that allows the house to function without the masters ever having to see the labor involved. The servants are the silent witnesses to the double lives. They see the master coming home with mud on his boots at 4 in the morning. They find the hidden letters in the mistress's writing desk. They know which son is drinking too much and which daughter is crying behind locked doors. The Victorian era is a golden age for the servant because information is the most valuable currency in London. A secret overheard on the landing can be worth a year's wages if whispered into the right ear, or it can be used as a silent lever to ensure job security. You reach your destination, a small, unremarkable club where the entrance is a simple nod to a man behind a sliding grate. As you enter, the smell of expensive tobacco and roasting meat greets you. This is a place of escape. Here, you can speak of things that are forbidden in your own parlor. You can discuss science that challenges the book of Genesis, or art that depicts the human form with a scandalous lack of drapery. You can be the version of yourself that does not have to worry about the neighbors or the parish priest. But even here, in this sanctuary of the secret life, there is an underlying anxiety. You are always listening for the sound of a heavy boot on the pavement or the sudden silence that heralds a scandal. The price of the double life is a constant low-level paranoia. You are a performer on a stage that never closes, and the audience is everyone you know. As you sit in the dim light of the club, you realize that this is the true Victorian experience. It is not just the tea parties and the lace doilies. It is the thrill of the hidden, the weight of the unsaid, and the shadow that follows you even under the brightest gas lamp. You are a citizen of a world that is terrified of the dark, yet finds itself drawn to it again and again. The rules are there to keep the city from falling into the abyss, but it is in the abyss that you often feel the most alive. The night wears on, and eventually you will have to step back out into the fog. You will have to walk back to your respectable street, straighten your cravat, and knock on your own front door. You will slip back into the role of the upright citizen, the dutiful son, or the devoted husband. You will bury the secrets of the night under a layer of morning tea and polite conversation. But as you fall asleep, the hiss of the gaslight will linger in your ears, a reminder that in this Victorian world, the light only tells half the story. The rest is written in the shadows, in the spaces between the words, and in the double lives that everyone around you is fighting so desperately to hide. You are a part of a grand, silent masquerade, and the dance will continue as long as the coal keeps burning and the fog keeps rolling in from the dark, cold river. You stand on the corner of a London street in the late 1890s, and for a moment you feel a strange, fluttering sensation in your chest. It is not the constriction of your corset, though that remains as tight as ever. It is the feeling of the world moving beneath your feet. The heavy, coal-dusted air of the Victorian era is still there, clinging to the brickwork and the velvet curtains of the parlors you visit, but something has changed. The silence of the great masquerade is being broken by new sounds. You hear the sharp, rhythmic ring of a bicycle bell and the distant, mechanical chug of an internal combustion engine. These are the sounds of the walls coming down. For decades, your entire existence has been defined by the boundary. There was a line for everything. There was the line between the parlor and the street, the line between the classes, and the rigid, unyielding line between what a man could do and what a lady must never dream of. But as you look around you in this twilight of the century, you realize that the ink is starting to fade. The social rules that felt like gravity for your entire life are beginning to feel, for the first time, like a choice. Think about the bicycle. You see a young woman pedaling past you, her face flushed with a kind of exertion that your mother would have found scandalous. She is wearing bloomers, full, baggy trousers that allow her legs to move freely. Only a few years ago, the mere sight of a female ankle was enough to cause a localized social earthquake. Now, here she is, unchaperoned, flying down the cobblestones at 10 miles per hour. She is literally riding away from the Victorian world. The bicycle has done more to dismantle the rules of courtship than 1,000 secret letters ever could. How can a chaperone keep pace with a girl on wheels? How can the old rules of formal introductions hold firm when young people are meeting in cycling clubs, miles away from the watchful eyes of their aunts in the drawing room? You walk toward a grand house where you have been invited for tea, but the ritual feels different today. You reach into your silk bag for your calling cards, those small rectangles of pasteboard that have governed your social life for 20 years. You remember the hours spent calculating how many cards to leave, which corner to fold, and whether a simple visit was enough to maintain a friendship or if a formal stay was required. But as you approach the door, you notice something new bolted to the wall in the hallway. It is a wooden box with a metal bell and a black funnel hanging from a cord. It is a telephone. The telephone is a quiet assassin of Victorian etiquette. In the old world, a conversation required a carriage, a card, a servant, and a formal seating arrangement. It required a physical presence and a dress code. Now, your hostess can pick up that funnel and speak directly into the ear of a friend 5 miles away. She can do it while wearing a dressing gown. She can do it without a servant acting as a gatekeeper. The layers of protection and distance that defined Victorian life are collapsing into a single copper wire. You feel a sense of vertigo. If anyone can speak to anyone at any time, what happens to the mystery? What happens to the dignity of the distance? Inside the drawing room, the conversation has a sharper edge than it used to. You sit among women who are no longer content to talk about the quality of the lace or the scandalous behavior of the curate. They are talking about the new woman. They are discussing university examinations, the right to own property, and the unthinkable idea of the vote. You see it in the way they sit. The rigid, upright posture of the mid-century is softening. Someone crosses their ankles. Someone else laughs a little too loudly. The curtsy you perform when a high-ranking guest enters is no longer the deep, sweeping dive of your youth. It is becoming a polite nod, a shorthand for a tradition that is losing its grip. You realize that the very architecture of your life is shifting. The department store has replaced the private visit as the center of your social world. In a shop like Whiteley's or Harrods, you are no longer a guest in someone's home, bound by the rules of their hospitality. You are a consumer. You can walk through the aisles, rubbing elbows with people from different social strata, and no one asks for your credentials. The department store is a neutral ground, a place where the strict hierarchies of the Victorian street are suspended in a haze of perfume and silk ribbons. You are free to wander, to look, and to be seen without the need for a formal introduction. Even the way you eat is changing. The massive 12-course dinners that lasted 4 hours are starting to feel like relics. The younger generation finds them stifling. They want shorter meals, lighter wines, and more time for dancing. The heavy, dark mahogany furniture that seemed so permanent, so rooted in the earth, is being replaced by lighter woods and floral patterns. The gloom of the Victorian interior is being chased away by the first flickers of electric light. You step back out into the evening air and hear the newsboys shouting on the corner. The headlines are not about the local gentry. They are about the world. You realize that the Queen, the woman who has sat on the throne for as long as anyone can remember, is growing frail. She is the anchor of this entire system. She is the mother of the nation, the supreme arbiter of morality, and the reason why everything is done just so. To imagine a world without Victoria is to imagine a world without its North Star. You feel a pang of genuine fear. When she goes, what will hold the rules in place? The twilight of the era is a strange, bittersweet time. You feel the liberation of the coming century, the excitement of the motor car and the cinema, but you also feel the loss of a certain kind of certainty. The Victorian rules were a cage, yes, but they were a cage that told you exactly where you stood. You knew who you were by who you were not allowed to speak to. You knew your value by the complexity of the rituals you were required to perform. Now, as those rituals fade, you are being asked to define yourself in a world that is becoming louder, faster, and much less predictable. You watch a group of young men walk by, and they are not wearing top hats. They are wearing soft caps, and they are whistling. They do not move aside for you with the exaggerated deference you were taught to expect. They are in a hurry. Everyone is in a hurry. The slow, deliberate pace of the 19th century is being overtaken by the frantic pulse of the 20th. As you walk home, you pass a house draped in black crepe. Someone has died, but the mourning rituals are not as elaborate as they once were. The widow is not hidden away behind a mountain of heavy black silk for 2 years. She will be out in 6 months. The industry of grief is shrinking. The obsession with the physical manifestation of morality is giving way to a more practical, perhaps more honest, way of living. You reach your own front door and pause. You look at your reflection in the polished brass of the knocker. You see a Victorian woman, a creature of rules, whispers, and perfectly timed bows. But behind your eyes, there is a new thought. You are wondering what it would be like to ride one of those bicycles. You are wondering what it would be like to speak your mind without filtering it through 3 layers of polite euphemism. The sun is setting on the Victorian world. The long shadows are stretching across the manicured lawns and the soot-stained squares. The curtsy is fading. The calling card is being replaced by the ring of the telephone. And the grand, silent masquerade is reaching its final act. You realize that you are not just a witness to the end of a century. You are the bridge to a new one. You take a deep breath, the air smelling of coal smoke and the faint, sharp tang of gasoline, and you step inside. The dance is almost over, but the music of the future is already playing, and it is a tune you have never heard before. You take off your gloves, place them on the table, and for the first time in your life, you do not worry about whether they are placed exactly 2 inches apart. The era is over, and you are finally terrifyingly free.